The kitchen of the Morris estate was Amy Chen's sanctuary for the past 8 years. Every morning at 5 a.m., she would arrive before anyone else, finding peace in the quiet moments before dawn. This morning was no different as she methodically prepared breakfast for the household staff and the Morris family. The aroma of freshly baked croissants filled the air as she checked her perfectly organized prep station. Amy had always dreamed of running her own kitchen, but life had other plans. As the daughter of Chinese immigrants who ran a small takeout restaurant, she learned early that dreams often took a back seat to reality. The sound of expensive leather shoes clicking against marble floors interrupted her thoughts. Marcus Morris, the heir to the Morris business empire, strode into the kitchen with his usual air of authority. At 32, he had already doubled his family's wealth through shrewd business decisions and an almost supernatural ability to spot opportunities. "Is breakfast ready?" he asked without looking up from his phone, his voice carrying that distinctive tone of someone used to getting immediate answers. "Yes, Mr. Morris. I'll have it sent up right away," Amy replied, maintaining her professional composure. She had learned long ago that people like Marcus Morris didn't see people like her. They looked through them. But this ordinary morning was about to become anything but ordinary. Sarah, the head of household staff, burst into the kitchen, her usually calm demeanor replaced with barely controlled panic. "Mr. Morris, we have an emergency," she announced, clutching her tablet like a lifeline. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his steel blue eyes narrowing. "What kind of emergency?" "Chef Harrison, he just quit, and the charity gala is tonight. 300 guests, including the mayor and half the city's elite." The kitchen fell silent. Amy felt the tension in the room rise as Marcus's expression darkened. "He quit? Today of all days?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Sarah nodded, her hands slightly trembling. "He got an offer from a restaurant in Paris. He left this morning." Marcus ran a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, a rare sign of frustration breaking through his controlled exterior. His eyes scanned the kitchen, finally landing on Amy. She felt her heart skip a beat as their eyes met. "You're the sous chef, right?" he asked, actually looking at her for the first time in 8 years. "Amy Chen, sir. And actually, I'm just a line cook." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "But you've been here the longest, haven't you?" Amy nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. 8 years, Mr. Morris." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Well, congratulations, Amy. You're in charge of tonight's gala dinner." The kitchen erupted in shocked whispers. Amy felt her mouth go dry. "Mr. Morris, I've never handled an event this big. Do you have a better solution?" he challenged, stepping closer. "Because I have 300 of the most influential people in the city arriving in 10 hours, and I need someone who knows this kitchen." Amy looked around at the familiar kitchen that had been her home for 8 years. She thought about all the nights she'd spent studying cookbooks after her shift, all the time she'd helped Chef Harrison prepare for big events, taking mental notes of every detail. Maybe this was her chance, her one opportunity to prove she was more than just a line cook. "I'll need to modify the menu," she said, straightening her spine. "Some of Chef Harrison's dishes are too complicated to execute properly with the time we have." For the first time, a hint of respect flickered in Marcus's eyes. "Fine. Show me what you can do," he said, checking his watch. "You have 1 hour to present me with a new menu." As Marcus left the kitchen, Sarah approached Amy with concern in her eyes. "Are you sure about this? If anything goes wrong..." Amy took a deep breath, already mentally cataloging ingredients and timing. "I've spent 8 years in this kitchen, Sarah. I know every inch of it, every supplier, every tool. I can do this." For the next hour, Amy worked furiously, creating a menu that would showcase her skills while being executable in the time frame. When Marcus returned, she presented him with not just a menu, but a complete timeline and execution plan. He reviewed it in silence, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he looked up at her, those intense blue eyes measuring her worth. "Interesting choices," he said, tapping the menu. "Local ingredients instead of imported ones. Bold move. Fresh and local means better quality control and reliability," Amy explained, finding confidence in her expertise. "And the flavors will be more intense." A small smile tugged at the corner of Marcus's mouth. "You've thought this through," he acknowledged. "But you understand what's at stake here?" Amy met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Mr. Morris. I do." "Then get to work. I'll be checking in regularly." As Marcus left the kitchen, Amy turned to her team, seeing both doubt and curiosity in their eyes. This was her moment. Her chance to prove that 8 years of watching, learning, and dreaming hadn't been in vain. "All right, everyone," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "We have a lot of work to do. Let's show them what this kitchen is capable of." The next few hours would either make or break her career. But for now, Amy Chen, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who once dreamed too small, was finally in charge of her own kitchen. And she was ready to prove she deserved to be there. The kitchen buzzed with focused energy as Amy orchestrated her team like a symphony conductor. Every station moved with precision, the rhythmic sound of knives against cutting boards creating their own culinary music. 30 minutes until first course, Amy called out, her voice steady despite the pressure building in her chest. She moved between stations, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, and ensuring every detail met her exacting standards. Marcus had been in and out of the kitchen throughout the day, his presence adding an extra layer of tension. "How are we looking?" he asked, appearing beside her as she finished plating a test dish. "On schedule," Amy replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Would you like to taste?" She held her breath as Marcus took a bite of her signature dish, a modern take on traditional Asian flavors merged with French techniques. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, his carefully maintained facade cracked. "This is unexpected," he said, studying the plate with newfound interest. Before Amy could respond, the first guests began arriving. The kitchen shifted into high gear as the evening service began. Each plate that left the kitchen was a piece of Amy's heart, her dreams transformed into edible art. In the dining room, the city's elite gathered in their finest attire. Among them was Michel Laurent, a renowned Michelin-starred chef known for his brutal honesty. "The first course is extraordinary," Amy overheard him say to his companion. "Who did you say was cooking tonight?" Her heart swelled with pride, but there was no time to dwell on compliments. The kitchen demanded her full attention as they moved through each course with military precision. Halfway through service, Marcus returned to the kitchen, his expression unusually animated. "Laurent wants to meet you," he said, catching Amy off guard. "He says it's the most innovative fusion of flavors he's tasted in years." Amy's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her chef's coat. "Now?" "But we're in the middle of service." Marcus's eyes softened unexpectedly. "The kitchen can handle 5 minutes without you. This is important." As Amy stepped into the dining room, she felt like an actress thrust onto a stage without rehearsal. Michel Laurent sat at the center table, his critical eyes studying her as she approached. "So, you are the one responsible for this magnificent meal?" he asked, his French accent thick with curiosity. "Yes, chef," Amy replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm honored you enjoyed it." Laurent leaned forward, his expression serious. "Tell me, where did you train? Paris? Tokyo?" Amy felt her cheeks flush. "Actually, I learned mostly in this kitchen, and from my parents' restaurant before that." Laurent's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Self-taught? Even more impressive. You have a gift, young lady, one that shouldn't be hidden in a private kitchen." From the corner of her eye, Amy noticed Marcus watching the interaction intently. "Thank you, chef," she managed to say, her heart racing with unexpected validation. As she returned to the kitchen, her mind spun with possibilities she'd never dared to consider before. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of activity and triumph. Each course was met with enthusiasm, and the kitchen staff's initial skepticism had transformed into respect. As the last dessert plates were cleared, exhausted but satisfied sighs filled the kitchen. They had done it. Against all odds, they had pulled off a perfect service. Amy was checking the final cleanup when Marcus appeared again. "My office, when you're done here," he said, his tone unreadable. An hour later, Amy knocked on his office door, her chef's coat exchanged for simple black pants and a white shirt. "Come in," Marcus called out, He sat behind his massive desk, his jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up. "Sit down, Amy," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She perched on the edge, suddenly nervous about what he might say. Tonight was... Marcus paused, seeming to search for the right words. Extraordinary. Amy's breath caught in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Morris." "Marcus," he corrected, leaning forward. "I think after tonight, you've earned the right to use my first name." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "I have a proposition for you," he said, turning back to face her. "I'm opening a new restaurant downtown. High-end, innovative cuisine. I've been searching for the right chef for months." Amy's heart began to race as she realized where this was heading. "Are you offering me a job?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "I'm offering you a partnership. Your talent, my business acumen. Together, we could create something extraordinary." Amy felt the room spin slightly. "A partnership? But I'm just a line cook?" Marcus cut in, his voice sharp. "No. Tonight you proved you're much more than that. You're a chef, Amy. A damn good one." He pulled out a folder and placed it in front of her. "Take this home. Look it over. It's a preliminary business plan. We can discuss details tomorrow." Amy took the folder with trembling hands. "Why me?" she asked, unable to stop herself. Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Because tonight I saw something rare, pure, passionate talent combined with practical skills. That's not something you can teach." As Amy left the office, clutching the folder to her chest, she felt like she was walking in a dream. 8 years of working in this kitchen, and finally, someone had seen her potential. But as she drove home, reality began to sink in. A partnership with Marcus Morris meant entering his world, a world she knew nothing about. Could she handle it? Could she trust him? Tomorrow would bring decisions, but tonight, Amy Chen allowed herself to simply dream. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown office building where Amy sat nervously adjusting her blazer. She had spent hours the night before reviewing Marcus's business proposal, barely sleeping as possibilities and doubts warred in her mind. The elevator dinged and Marcus strode out, his presence commanding attention as always. "Good morning," he said, unlocking the glass doors. "I hope you've had time to review the proposal." Amy followed him into the empty space, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floors. "I did. It's ambitious," she replied, choosing her words carefully. Marcus turned to face her, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Ambitious is what I do best. The question is, are you ready to be ambitious too?" The space around them was raw, but held immense potential, much like their potential partnership. "Before I answer," Amy said, squaring her shoulders, "I need to understand something. What exactly do you expect from me?" Marcus walked to the windows, gesturing at the view of the city below. "I expect excellence, innovation, the same passion I saw in that kitchen yesterday." He turned back to her, his blue eyes intense. "But I also expect honesty. If you think something won't work, I need to know." Amy nodded, then took a deep breath. "Like the imported caviar and truffles you mentioned in the proposal?" Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "You have concerns about the luxury ingredients?" "I have concerns about building a menu around ingredients that prioritize prestige over quality and sustainability." She held her ground as Marcus studied her, waiting for his response. "Explain," he said simply, leaning against a pillar. "The best restaurants in the world are moving towards local, sustainable ingredients," Amy began, her passion overriding her nervousness. "It's not just about environmental responsibility. It's about creating unique, authentic experiences." Marcus listened intently as she continued. "Instead of imported truffles, we could work with local mushroom foragers, build relationships with nearby farms, create dishes that tell a story about this place, this moment." A moment of silence followed her words. "You've really thought this through," Marcus finally said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. "I have. And if we're going to be partners, you need to know that this is how I think, how I cook." The word partners hung in the air between them. "Show me," Marcus said suddenly. "What?" "Show me your vision. There's a test kitchen 3 floors down. Show me what you mean about local ingredients." 2 hours later, they sat at a small table in the test kitchen, sharing the dishes Amy had created. "This mushroom dish," Marcus said, taking another bite. "It's incredible. And these are local." Amy nodded, watching him savor the food. "From forests just outside the city. The forager I work with knows exactly when and where to find the best varieties." Marcus set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "You know what this reminds me of?" he asked softly. "The first time I had truly great food. I was 12, in a tiny restaurant in Italy." Amy leaned forward, surprised by this glimpse of personal history. What made it great? The chef knew every ingredient story. Where it came from, who grew it, why it mattered. He met her eyes across the table. "That's what I hear when you talk about food. That same passion for stories." Amy felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "So," she said, gathering her courage, "are we going to tell stories together?" Marcus smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Yes, but with one condition." "What's that?" "You have to promise to always be this honest with me, even when I'm being difficult." "Are you admitting you can be difficult?" Amy teased, surprising herself with her boldness. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in the kitchen. "I'm admitting I know my reputation, but I'm also admitting I want this partnership to be different." He stood up and walked to the window, his expression becoming serious again. "This restaurant, it's not just another business venture for me. I want to create something meaningful." Amy joined him at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "Then let's do it right," she said softly. "From the ground up." Marcus turned to her, extending his hand. "Partners?" Amy took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip. "Partners." As they shook hands, both knew they were stepping into unknown territory. Marcus, the business titan used to controlling every aspect of his ventures, would have to learn to trust someone else's vision. And Amy, the kitchen perfectionist who had always worked in the background, would have to step into the spotlight. But in that moment, watching the city spread out before them, anything seemed possible. "We should celebrate," Marcus said suddenly. "Dinner tonight?" "To discuss next steps." Amy hesitated for a moment, aware of crossing another line between professional and personal. "Just dinner," he added, reading her hesitation. "Between partners." She smiled, making her decision. "Okay, but I choose the restaurant." "Deal," Marcus agreed, his eyes twinkling. "Something tells me you know all the hidden gems in this city." As they left the test kitchen, both felt the shift in their dynamic. They were no longer employer and employee, but partners embarking on a shared adventure. And though neither would admit it, both felt the subtle spark of something more beginning to take root. The first week of restaurant planning revealed the stark differences in Marcus and Amy's approaches to their shared vision. The morning sun filtered through the windows of their temporary office as they faced off over design plans. "The kitchen needs to be more visible," Marcus insisted, his finger tracing the architectural drawings. "Diners today want to see the action." Amy shook her head, her dark hair falling loose from its usually neat bun. "A show kitchen is one thing, but this design sacrifices functionality for theatrics." She pulled out her own sketches, carefully drawn during late-night planning sessions. "We need more prep space here," she explained, pointing to the layout. "And the flow between stations has to be seamless." Marcus leaned closer, his cologne subtly mingling with the coffee aroma that perpetually filled their workspace. "Show me," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Help me understand your perspective." Amy felt a small thrill at his willingness to listen. Something she'd noticed was rare for him. "In a professional kitchen, every second counts," she began, allowing her passion to override her usual reserve. "It's like a dance. Each chef needs to move freely without interrupting another's rhythm." Marcus watched her as she spoke, his blue eyes focused intently on her animated gestures. "You see it as choreography," he mused, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I do," Amy admitted. "But you see it as theater." "Maybe we need both," Marcus suggested, surprising her. "Your choreography behind the scenes, my theater for the guests." They worked late into the evening, revising plans until they found a balance between their visions. As Amy gathered her things to leave, Marcus cleared his throat. "Have dinner with me," he said, then quickly added, "to celebrate finalizing the kitchen design." Amy hesitated, aware of the growing warmth she felt in his presence. I know a great little place in Chinatown, she offered. Very different from your usual spots. Marcus's eyes lit up with curiosity. Lead the way, partner. The restaurant was tiny, with steam-fogged windows and tables crowded together. Marcus looked comically out of place in his tailored suit, but his enthusiasm was genuine. This is incredible, he declared, sampling another dumpling. How did you find this place? Amy smiled, watching him navigate chopsticks with determined concentration. My parents' first restaurant was just like this. Small, authentic, full of heart. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Tell me about them, he said softly. Your parents. Amy found herself sharing stories of growing up in her family's kitchen, of learning to cook by feel rather than recipes. They taught me that food is about more than taste, she explained. It's about memory, connection, love. Marcus was quiet for a moment, twirling his chopsticks thoughtfully. My parents were different, he finally said. Everything was about appearance, success, living up to the Morris name. Amy saw a flash of vulnerability in his eyes before he masked it. Is that why you're doing this? She asked gently. The restaurant. Marcus met her gaze across the small table. Partly, he admitted. I want to create something that's more than just another status symbol. Their conversation flowed easily, personal and professional boundaries blurring in the intimate setting. Walking back to their cars, Amy felt a new understanding between them. Thank you, Marcus said suddenly, stopping under a street lamp. For what? For showing me your world. It's different from what I'm used to. Amy smiled, noticing how the light softened his usually sharp features. Different can be good, she offered. Yes, he agreed softly, his eyes holding hers. It can be. The next day brought new challenges as they tackled menu planning. These prices are impossible, Marcus argued, reviewing Amy's proposals. They're fair, she countered. Quality ingredients cost money, but we can make it work. By charging less than our competitors? It doesn't make sense. Amy took a deep breath, reminding herself of their agreement to be honest with each other. What doesn't make sense is charging inflated prices just because we can. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was frustrated but listening. Explain your reasoning, he said, making a visible effort to keep his tone neutral. We build loyalty, Amy began. Offer exceptional food at fair prices. Create a place people come back to, not just for special occasions. She watched understanding dawn in his eyes. A restaurant that becomes part of people's lives, he murmured. Exactly. Their eyes met, and Amy felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. You're changing how I think about this business, Marcus admitted. You're changing how I think about taking risks, Amy responded. They shared a smile, both aware of the growing connection between them. As they returned to work, Amy couldn't help but wonder where this partnership was leading them. Every day seemed to bring them closer, professionally and personally. And though neither would admit it, their evening planning sessions were beginning to feel less like work and more like something else entirely. Something that both excited and terrified them. Something that could either strengthen their partnership or complicate it beyond repair. But for now, they had a restaurant to build. And somehow, that seemed both the simplest and most complex thing in their evolving relationship. The restaurant's construction was progressing rapidly when the first signs of trouble appeared. Amy was reviewing produce deliveries in their temporary office when Sarah, her former colleague from the Morris estate, rushed in. Have you seen this? Sarah asked, her tablet trembling slightly in her hand. On the screen was a society blog post. Marcus Morris's latest venture, business or pleasure? The article featured a paparazzi photo of Amy and Marcus at the small Chinatown restaurant, their heads close together in conversation. Amy felt her stomach drop as she read the speculative text beneath. Sources close to Morris suggest his new partnership with an unknown chef might be more than professional. Marcus arrived moments later, his jaw tight with controlled anger. I assume you've seen it, he said, loosening his tie with unusual agitation. Amy nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I'm sorry, she said softly. This must be embarrassing for you. Marcus crossed the room in 3 quick strides, surprising her by kneeling beside her chair. Embarrassing? Amy, I'm angry because they're diminishing your talent with cheap gossip. She looked up, caught off guard by the intensity in his blue eyes. But your reputation, my reputation can handle it, he cut in. I'm more concerned about how this affects you. Before Amy could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. Eleanor, he muttered, looking at the screen. I should take this. Amy watched him step out, noticing the tension in his shoulders. Later that afternoon, a striking woman in designer clothes appeared at their office. Marcus, she called out, her voice carrying a hint of past intimacy. We need to talk. Eleanor Carter was everything Amy wasn't: polished, sophisticated, clearly from Marcus's world. Eleanor, Marcus acknowledged, his voice carefully neutral. This isn't a good time. It's about the restaurant, Eleanor insisted, her eyes flicking dismissively over Amy. In your interesting choice of partner. Amy felt her cheeks burn, but held her ground. I'll give you two some privacy, she offered, moving toward the door. Stay, Marcus said firmly, surprising both women. Anything about the restaurant concerns both partners. Eleanor's perfectly manicured hand tightened on her designer bag. Fine, I'll be direct. The board is concerned, Marcus. This venture seems impulsive. The board? Amy asked, confusion evident in her voice. Morris Enterprises Board of Directors. Eleanor clarified with a cold smile. Of which I'm a member. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between the two women. The restaurant is a private venture, Eleanor. The board has no say in this. Everything you do affects company stock, Marcus. You know that. She turned to Amy, her expression softening with fake sympathy. Dear, you seem talented, but you have to understand, Marcus does this. Finds new projects, gets intensely involved, then moves on when he's bored. Amy felt each word like a physical blow, but years in professional kitchens had taught her to keep her expression neutral. Thank you for your concern, she replied evenly. But I trust my partner. Eleanor laughed, the sound like tinkling glass. Partner? Oh, honey, I was his partner too once. Ask him how that ended. Marcus's face had gone pale with anger. That's enough, Eleanor. Is it? Have you told her about the other restaurants? The other partners? Amy stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Miss Carter, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Whether Marcus has had other ventures isn't relevant. What matters is this restaurant now. Eleanor studied her with new interest. Brave words. I hope you mean them when he moves on to his next project. After she left, silence filled the office like smoke. Amy, Marcus began, but she held up a hand. Do we need to talk about this? She asked quietly. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect styling. Yes, but not here. Come with me. They ended up at a small park near the construction site. Eleanor and I were partners in a restaurant 5 years ago. Marcus began without preamble. Amy sat silently, letting him talk. It failed. Badly. I handled it poorly, pulled out without much warning. He turned to face her, his expression raw with honesty. I was different then, focused only on profit, not passion. And now? Amy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I'm trying to build something real, something that matters. He reached for her hand, then seemed to think better of it. I need you to believe that. Amy studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath his usual confidence. I believe you want to, she said carefully. But Marcus, I put everything into this. My savings, my reputation, my dreams. I know, he said softly. And I promise you, I'm all in. No running away this time. Amy nodded slowly, processing his words. Okay, she finally said. But no more surprises. If there's anything else I should know. Full disclosure, Marcus agreed quickly. From both of us. As they walked back to the office, Amy felt the weight of unspoken feelings between them. Eleanor's visit had forced them to confront the personal dimensions of their partnership. And though they'd weathered this storm, Amy sensed bigger challenges ahead. Because despite her best efforts to keep things professional, she was falling for Marcus Morris. And judging by the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, she wasn't falling alone. The restaurant was set to open in 2 weeks, and the pressure was mounting like steam in a sealed pot. Amy stood in the gleaming new kitchen, running her hands along the perfectly installed countertops. Everything was exactly as she had envisioned, yet her stomach churned with anxiety. Second thoughts? Marcus's voice came from behind her, carrying a hint of his own nervousness. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled after a long day of meetings. Not about the restaurant, Amy replied honestly. Just wondering if I'm ready for this level of visibility. Marcus crossed the kitchen, his presence both comforting and unsettling. The woman who stood up to Eleanor Carter is worried about visibility, he teased gently. Amy smiled despite her nerves, remembering how their relationship had strengthened since that confrontation. Standing up to one person is different from facing food critics and social media reviews. You're not facing them alone, Marcus reminded her, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. The contact sent warmth spreading through her body, a reminder of their increasingly complex relationship. Their staff was arriving tomorrow for training, and Amy had insisted on cooking dinner for the entire team tonight. "Will you stay?" she asked Marcus, trying to keep her tone casual. "I could use a sous chef." His eyes lit up with surprise and pleasure. "You're trusting me in your kitchen? That's a first." "Well, you've been paying attention during our menu tastings," she said, handing him an apron. They worked together in comfortable silence, Marcus following her quiet instructions with unexpected skill. "You're not terrible at this," Amy observed, watching him perfectly dice vegetables. "High praise indeed," he chuckled. "Maybe I learned from watching you." The simple domesticity of cooking together felt dangerous somehow, too intimate for business partners. Yet neither could deny the rightness of it. As they plated the staff dinner, Marcus cleared his throat. "Amy, about what Eleanor said." She looked up, catching the uncertainty in his eyes. "Marcus, we don't need to." "Yes, we do," he interrupted gently. "Because she was right about one thing. I used to run when things got complicated." Amy set down her spoon, giving him her full attention. "And now?" Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw. "Now I'm learning that complicated isn't always bad, that some things are worth staying for." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. "Marcus!" The timer's sharp buzz broke the moment, making them both jump. "The bread," Amy murmured, turning quickly to the oven. They served dinner to their assembled staff, watching as the team began to bond over good food and shared excitement. "They're going to be great," Marcus whispered, leaning close to be heard over the chatter. Amy nodded, feeling a surge of pride as she watched their carefully chosen team interact. Later, after everyone had left, they found themselves back in the kitchen, cleaning up together. "This feels right," Marcus said suddenly, drawing a wine glass with careful attention. "What does?" "All of it. The restaurant, the team." He hesitated, then added softly, "Us." Amy's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Marcus, we can't complicate things. Not with openings so close." He set down the glass, turning to face her. "I think things are already complicated, Amy. Have been since that first night in the test kitchen." She couldn't deny it, but fear held her silent. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued, "just acknowledging what we both know is happening." Amy dried her hands slowly, buying time to steady her voice. "And what exactly is happening?" Marcus smiled, that rare genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "I'm falling for my business partner. Rather inconvenient, really." The honesty in his voice made her heart race. "Very inconvenient," she agreed, trying to maintain their light tone. "Especially since I think she might be falling for me too." Amy met his eyes, seeing her own mix of fear and hope reflected there. "Marcus, if this goes wrong." "It won't," he said with quiet confidence. "You can't know that." "No, but I know us. How we work together, how we balance each other." He took a step closer, careful not to crowd her. "I know that watching you in this kitchen is the highlight of my day, that you've changed how I think about everything." Amy felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "We have 2 weeks until opening," she said practically. "We need to focus on that." Marcus nodded, accepting her implicit request for time. "Of course, the restaurant comes first." But as they gathered their things to leave, he caught her hand. "Just know that when you're ready to talk about this, I'm here." Amy squeezed his hand once before letting go. "I know." Driving home that night, Amy realized that opening the restaurant might be the easier of the challenges facing them. Because while she knew exactly how to run a kitchen, She had no idea how to handle falling in love with Marcus Morris. And as much as she tried to focus on their professional partnership, her heart had other plans. 2 weeks suddenly seemed both too long and not long enough to figure it all out. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same after opening night. For better or worse, they were about to embark on the biggest challenge of their lives. And they would face it together, whatever that meant. 1 week before opening night, Amy stood in the silent kitchen at 5 a.m., her fingers tracing the cool stainless steel surfaces. Today was their first full test service, a private dinner for 50 of the city's most influential food critics and restaurateurs. The weight of everything they'd built together pressed against her chest like a physical force. The gentle click of the back door announced Marcus's arrival, earlier than usual. "I thought I'd find you here," he said softly, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Couldn't sleep either?" Amy accepted the coffee, noting how he'd prepared it exactly as she liked. A small detail that spoke volumes about their evolving relationship. "I keep running through everything that could go wrong," she admitted, the steam from the cup warming her face. Marcus leaned against the counter beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "Want to know what I think could go wrong?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of playful challenge. "Do I? We could play it too safe. Hold back, not show them who we really are." Amy turned to study his profile in the dim, early morning light. "When did you become the optimistic one?" His laugh was soft but genuine. "Since I met someone who taught me that taking risks isn't always about business strategy." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken meaning. Their staff began arriving, breaking the intimate atmosphere with the familiar bustle of kitchen preparation. Amy watched with pride as her team moved through their stations with growing confidence. Marcus worked the front of house, his natural charisma now tempered with the genuine warmth he developed over their months of collaboration. By evening, the restaurant hummed with nervous energy as their first guests arrived. "They're here," Marcus murmured, stepping into the kitchen briefly. "Ready?" Amy nodded, already focused on plating the first course. "Born ready," she replied, earning a warm smile from him. The service began smoothly, each dish leaving the kitchen exactly as they'd practiced. Through the kitchen window, Amy could see Marcus moving among the tables, sharing the story behind each dish with natural enthusiasm. He learned every detail of her recipes, every source of their ingredients, making her vision his own. Halfway through service, a complication arose. One guest announced a severe allergy they hadn't been warned about. "We need to modify the main course," Amy called out, her mind already racing through alternatives. Without missing a beat, Marcus appeared at her side. "What do you need?" Together, they created a new dish on the fly, their months of collaboration evident in how seamlessly they worked together. "Like dancing," Marcus whispered, echoing her words from months ago about kitchen choreography. Amy felt her cheeks warm, remembering all the moments that had led them here. The modified dish was a success, earning particular praise from the affected guest. As the dessert course went out, the buzz of conversation from the dining room grew increasingly positive. Marcus returned to the kitchen, his eyes bright with excitement. "They love it, Amy. Every single dish. You should hear what they're saying." But Amy was focused on a small imperfection in one of the dessert plates. "This isn't right," she muttered, her perfectionism threatening to overshadow their success. Marcus gently took the plate from her hands. "Look at me," he said quietly, waiting until she met his eyes. "It's perfect. You're perfect." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning beyond the professional. Amy felt the familiar flutter in her chest, stronger now than ever. "Marcus." "I know," he said quickly. "Not now. Not yet. But soon." She nodded, unable to deny the hope in his voice. Soon. The evening wound down with glowing reviews and enthusiastic congratulations. After the last guest left, the staff celebrated with champagne, their relief and pride palpable. Amy found herself on the restaurant's small balcony, taking a moment to process everything. Marcus joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To us," he offered, extending one to her. "To the restaurant," she corrected gently, but accepted the glass. "You know," Marcus said, looking out over the city lights, I used to think success was about numbers, profit margins, market share. Amy sipped her champagne, watching him. And now I think it's about moments like this, creating something real, something that matters. He turned to face her, his expression open and vulnerable. Something worth holding on to. Amy felt the double meaning in his words, the weight of everything unspoken between them. 1 week, she said softly. Let's get through opening week. Then we talk. Marcus finished, hope evident in his voice. Then we talk, she confirmed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pressures, new fears. But for now, in this moment, they had created something magical together. And maybe, Amy thought, as she felt Marcus's hand brush against hers, they were creating something even more magical between them. The real test would come with opening night, but somehow, standing here with Marcus, Amy felt ready for anything. Because whatever happened next, they would face it together. As partners, as friends, and maybe, soon, as something more.